Hello, everybody, and welcome to the I Am IT Geek YouTube channel. My name is Shabazz Dan. As ever, I am the IT Geek. You probably caught the introduction to this series last week, where I introduced myself and my co-host, Shannon Keane. Hi, Shannon.
Hi, how's it going?
I'm not bad. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well.
Excellent, excellent. So yeah, this is episode one, and I think we gave a bit of an outline in that intro to what we're going to be talking about, and this first sort of episode is around demystifying licensing and that initial sort of configuration. I've obviously worked with especially Microsoft Cloud for a good 8-9 years now, and one of the pain points has always been licensing, and
Right.
if we forget for a second, they change the name all the time. So we went from that transition from Office 365 Office to Microsoft 365. That was good fun. But it's also with organizations understanding what are we actually paying for.
Yeah.
There's always that sort of people get drawn towards Azure AD Premium 1 or Premium 2. They get drawn towards sort of the Intune endpoint manager license and the Office subscriptions, and they normally like to get a bundle that includes those. But even if those sort of your key requirements, a lot of the time you get so many other features that you might not have needed, but are so good for your organization as from a security and governance perspective. Um, and I've had loads of examples with clients that we've kind of looked, when you're doing reviews of their infrastructure and you go, look, you're not using half of these sort of features, you know that you could benefit from that. E5 is a great example, I think, Shannon. I don't know what your thoughts are around that.
I definitely think so, and I feel like it's sort of hit home when you have a customer who has P2, whether it be the standalone P2 SKU or something like the E5 SKU, and then they're looking at bringing on some sort of third-party solution to do the same thing. So that's when I've always said, listen, you've got all of the ways of doing certain things. Maybe what we do here is we think about reviewing what you've got, determining does it make sense to onboard some sort of third party solution, or is it something that makes more sense just to really dig deeper on what you've got. So there is a Microsoft specialist. His name is Aaron Dinage. So thank you, Aaron, for being awesome here. He runs M365Maps.com, and it's an invaluable resource in the sense that I don't know about you, but I feel like most customers are visual. I'm a visual learner.
Hmm.
And I think the big paradigm shift here is we went from boxed products where you were licensing a server, adding CALs, or maybe you were switching from the standard server to the enterprise server, right? Well, now we have a lot of flexibility. I think that's the hard part for customers. All of a sudden, we have a number of different customers, a lot of different unique scenarios, and then we've got these bundled SKUs that are born from the art of being flexible, right? And
Yeah.
that's the hard part. So when you look at this, right, you're getting a lot of goodies on the right. And usually the reason why customers will start to gravitate towards the P1 or the P2 license SKU is all of the security features, right? Wouldn't you say that's kind of where they start to gravitate towards those features?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the sort of, especially the Azure AD sort of stuff, you're talking about conditional access, single sign-on, MFA. Those are the ones that, a lot of organizations, in my experience, gravitate towards.
Yes. And then, I don't think people have thought through the notion of identity governance. So a lot has changed in the last 2 years. I really
Hmm.
wish we didn't have to go through it. But as a result, there's been some unique conversations and some ways in which people are now starting to think about identity governance, right? So the idea that, the people that went home in March of 2020 for lockdown aren't necessarily the same people that are coming back to the office now that we're
Yeah.
sort of getting back to normal. So you've got a lot of people who are using a number of different devices, not advices, devices to access things across a number of different platforms. And so you might need a way to govern identity. And that's where you would think about getting a P2 license SKU, whether that be the standalone SKU or part of the E5 license suite. And
Hmm.
the big pieces here are access reviews, entitlement management, privilege
Yeah.
identity management, and then the notion of risk-based conditional access, Azure Identity Protection. Those are kind of in the realm of identity governance, and you see them showing up at the very top underneath the Azure AD Premium 2 plan.
Yeah. But again, you touched on it as well, Shannon, that the world has changed, because of COVID, because some people aren't working on corporate devices anymore because they're working from home. They're working on their own device, but they're having to access corporate resources. It's difficult for you to, to protect that device because it's technically you don't own it as an organization. But what can you protect? Their identity. What can you govern? Their identity, because that is technically owned by you as the organization. My corporate username with Netcompany, that's technically Netcompany own that. That's their tenant. So that's where all these sort of services come in, and even with the sort of additional stuff you get on the right hand side there, like the endpoint analytics, and that's kind of more, they're kind of like you said, more device orientated. Where with the Azure AD P2, it's more identity sort of stuff, isn't it?
Yes, I would think that's where sort of the line divides. And it's just one of those things where folks haven't even thought about this, right? The idea that you can sort of programmatically provide access, go through an access review, and you can think about privileged identity management, so that somebody's not going in and, have, global administrator rights. I think you and I, when we were talking about this, a lot of times when you collaborate with guest users, they often say they just need global administrator rights. And this is a way, so if they really do need it, this is a way to sort of protect that you're not giving somebody access to global administrator rights indefinitely, and that you've got an audit trail as well. So I think in the world of regulation, I don't think any company's immune anymore. I feel like more and more companies, especially in the day and age that we're in, they need ways to sort of track who's doing what and who has access to the right resources at the right time. Versus me working for a company and moving around a number of different roles, I probably shouldn't have access to the same SharePoint sites. I shouldn't have access to the same different file sets, right? Especially if it's got certain things like PII data, right? So you probably want to think about this if you haven't thought it through, or review what you've got, because a lot of times customers will buy this and, they're focused on Intune. They're focused on specific things that are, smaller in comparison to some of the bigger pieces that you wind up sort of being able to tackle with the E5 license suite.
One of my favorite features has got to be just-in-time access, or JIT, if you want to call it. I mean, again, that's not really I suppose it can be used for users, but I mean, I see it more in the administrative world where, you have various teams within your organization. Obviously, we're going to do a deeper dive into this later on, but it's just something that always pops in. I love just-in-time access, and you might have various teams within your organization who there are IT, but it might be network, one might be identity, one might be storage, but they need access to a certain element of the certain resource, but only for a certain amount of time. For example, to run some maintenance, they might need some time between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. They don't need to access it other times, so you give them access for that specific amount of time for a specific account, and after that, it automatically goes. And it's just a great, that's one of my favorite features of the sort of identity and governance, I've got to admit.
Yeah, and I think dovetailing onto that, privileged identity management, right? So if somebody needs to go in and do some group-based configuration or some user-based configuration, or they need to go in and they need to provision a certain service that requires elevated rights. If they have an eligible role, they can go and they can activate it. It's time boxed, and then it's auditable, right? So I think that's the big piece that we didn't have. Well, take that back. We had it. It was just did you actually buy MIM, right? Did you actually implement MIM? And a lot of your small to medium businesses chose not to. It was just a lot of extra overhead that was a little tough. Now your bigger enterprises did. So this is sort of like thinking through the next evolution, right? This is not MIM in the cloud by any stretch of the definition. This is kind of the next evolution of what identity governance looks like, especially with all of these cloud-based identities and a lot of these SaaS-based applications, right?
Yeah, and it's again, you've used this word auditing quite a few times. That's where the governance piece comes in. It's not just being able to control who has access to it. It's being able to have an audit trail that if you do need to review that you have some sort of security incident that's occurred, you need to review who's been accessing what and when and why.
Right.
That these features give you all that, and that's just as important as being able to control access, being able to audit it. So it's a very key feature as well.
Yes, I agree. But I think, the big piece here is we'll link to the M365 Maps.com. It's not just the E5 license suite. In fact, it's the full kind of M365 universe. So if you are somebody that's trying to make sense of what do you wind up buying when you sort of move your environment into the cloud, I feel like that's a great landing spot, and everything is downloadable. There's a corresponding GitHub repo where everything sort of lives, but the site is generally where you go to, and you can download whatever you need. You can download it as a PNG or a PDF. I just feel like customers are this mixed bag. Like if we could have solved for customers, we would have all been in the cloud in like 2010, right? But because customers are so different and unique, and human nature just wants to try and solve for everything, we've evolved. And then as a result, this sort of perceived complexity is really a result of being flexible to the customer, right? Allowing them to sort of pick a la carte what makes the most sense for their use case and their business needs.
All the links will be in the description of this video, by the way. So we'll make sure you have everybody has links to those. You know what? I'd be interested if if we were looking at this image on screen here. I'd be interested to see, or if people who are watching this video are picking out what they actually do use on this list and what they don't use. Again, not everything. You don't need to use everything within a license SKU, but I know I can guarantee there'll be some people watching. They'll be like, "Wow, why we're not using access reviews? We could, that would be perfect for us.
Yeah.
Why we're not using it, or just in time access. That'd be great to use. That'd really benefit us. I'd be interested to see how many users or viewers are actually using some of these and the ones that aren't.
I feel like if you wind up enabling certain features, even just to try it out, you should definitely let us know. Whether it be a direct message on Twitter or a comment on the video,
Yeah.
or even send us an email, I suppose. Unfortunately, I think my email has made it around to the world at large. Every once in a while, I do get an email to my Microsoft email account. So, you can probably find it one way or another. Or if you're just, communicate with Microsoft folks, you can probably piece together what my email is. So, but yeah, so there's a number of ways to probably get a hold of us. Unfortunately, the telemetry that Microsoft captures, it's everybody, right? So
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to say tenant X turned everything on and I can explicitly see that. No, we capture telemetry for all of the tenants that are sort of what we consider eligible, right? So if you do turn it on, though, we'd love to hear the stories, just because of the fact I think the stories are what make this a super compelling use case.
No, I'll put our Twitter handles in the description as well. But obviously, as Shannon said, please do leave us a comment, and just so we can understand, what are these sort of image, especially on the left hand side, which is
Yeah.
what our main focus is in this sort of this whole series. What are you using, and is there something that you're not using that you think would benefit you didn't know about?
Yeah.
So please do let us know. And that's really what I wanted to touch on in this episode. Just wanted to touch on that sort of licensing area, and sort of basically try and make it a bit more simpler for you. The next episode, as I think we've mentioned in the first sort of introduction, is going to be actually taking a deeper dive into identity governance, and why is it important for you? Why should you actually care about it? So please, stay tuned for that. Hopefully it should be released. I'm hoping not too long after this episode, so it might be a couple of days. So as I said, and as Shannon said, please do drop us a comment of anything around, or any questions you might have. Both our Twitter handles are in the description as well. But thank you again, Shannon. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
And until next time, thank you and goodbye.